Melbourne. And just to give people an idea in Sri Lanka of the weather, it snowed last week. Not a lot of snow, but it was snowing. So a bit unimaginable in Sri Lanka. So thank you particularly to Mr. Kumar Punchiheva for inviting me to give this desana on the occasion of the fourth anniversary of the Arana Gimanhala, Bhikkhu Gimanhala at Batramula, which provides accommodation for often for foreign monks, forest monks coming into Colombo to stay for a short time. And this, as I mentioned, is the fourth anniversary. I was actually present at the first anniversary of the Gimanhala, the Arana Bhikkhu Gimanhala. And of course today, the occasion for this today, of course, is Mr. Kumar's Punchiheva's birthday, 70th birthday today. So happy birthday to you, as they say. Or Priti Upandiniak Veva. Priti Upandiniak Veva. I can see some people on the screen. And also the main purpose of this desana too is to dedicate merit to the departed Kalyana Mittas and family and friends of Mr. Punchiheva, out of gratitude. And this is a wonderful thing to do out of gratitude. And we have the dedication of merit at the end of the desana. So Mr. Punchiheva very appropriately requested a desana, a Dhamma talk on anicca or anicca, or impermanence, we say in English. There are many words for it. So today I'd like to talk about that, and the title for this talk will be Anitya or Anicca, the wisdom that frees us. It's a very important and very deep subject. So thank you for asking for that. So now just do the Namo Tassa and the preliminary chant. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. And then the chant, which I think many people will be familiar with. Anicca Vata Sankhara Upadavaya Dhammino Upajitva Nirujanti Te Sangvupasamo Sukho. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So as many people will have heard that chant, of course, at funerals. It's always in a Buddhist connection or Buddhist country, it's chanted. And it's a reflection on impermanence. And the translation, this is the English translation that is quite good. Impermanent indeed are all conditioned things. Impermanent indeed are all conditioned things. They arise and decay. Varadamino. That is their nature. Having arisen, upanchitva, they cease, nirujanti. The going out of them is bliss. The going out of bliss. And this is Tesang Vupasamo Sukho. And this was chanted by the Sakka, the king of the Devas at the time of the Buddha's parinibbana. But as I mentioned, it's something that we hear at funerals all the time. And maybe the meaning of it is not so clear to many people, especially as it's usually in Pali. But conditioned things, of course, is everything that arises from causes and conditions, made up, as it were. And this really includes everything we know in the world, certainly our bodies and minds. and all the sense contacts we have, the world as we experience it through seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching, and thinking about it. And when the Buddha mentions, we have that's the conditioned things, they're of the nature to arise and decay. That's something that we all see, that things arise, we come into birth, that the body decays and then passes away. This is the nature of all conditioned things. It is, as you say, reality. And having arisen, they cease. And when we use the word cease here, it also has a sense of the final cessation or going out, as it mentions in the next line. The translation of vipassamo, tesang vipassamo sukho, can be, usually it's calming or settling of these things, settling of them is happiness or bliss. But one of the translations is going out or extinguishing. So that is a very meaningful one, especially at the time of the Buddha's passing away, because often we say when somebody dies, may they rest in peace, R.I.P. And but we know that for most people they will be coming back to another to a life of all the things that are involved with taking birth, old age, sickness, and death, of course, the happinesses, the unhappinesses. But when we say going out of them is bliss, it also means like the parinibbana, because of course the Buddha mentions that the highest happiness is nibbana. So that is the introduction verse, as it were, the Gatha for the talk today. And now I'd like to ask the question, why are we having a talk about anicca or anitya, impermanence? Why? Most people, everybody can observe it, can't they? Really, everybody can observe it. And I think particularly as we get older, we become more aware, more attuned to anicca or anitya. And I suspect today, and part of the reason for this desana was that Mr. Kumar Punchiheva is thinking in those terms too for himself. He's seeing the body grow older. He's seeing relatives, his wife, pass away. He's seeing possessions, homes and vehicles growing older, breaking down. And also when we experience sickness, that was another example of impermanence. And of course, death. And we see it in others much, much more easily than we do in ourselves. We also see it on the television or the news, the internet, when we see death and destruction and all this sort of thing. And we see that with the Beirut at the moment, after the very distressing bombing that occurred, explosion that occurred there. And all the damage that has been done, and all the people have been killed, and all the difficulty that's led to the people who are living there now. But we can see this usually more in terms of other people outside ourselves, but we don't tend to see it as much in ourselves. This anitya, this impermanence. We can see our bodies growing older, but I always notice it's much easier to see other people's bodies growing older. And we know that these bodies that are our vehicles for this life will one day die. They have to. But the interesting thing is that we always have this feeling that there's an I or a me or myself, which is constant. Amidst all this change, all this impermanence, all this anitya that we experience or we see. And it's always good to reflect that if we aren't stream enterers, if we aren't sowans, if we haven't seen the Dhamma, then really we don't understand anicca, do we? And it reminds me of a video that a monk, a Sri Lankan monk, sent me some years ago of a man in India. And he was at a beach with one of those bathroom floor wipers. I think they call them floor wipers in Sri Lanka, where you push the water into the drains. But he was at the sea with this bathroom floor wiper, and he was pushing back the sea. The waves were coming in, and he was busy pushing them back. And though it was a bit humorous, and the immediate reaction I had, and I think most people would have it, he must be crazy. But then I realized, I thought to myself, this is what we're all doing. We're trying to fight the conditions that are around us. We're trying to create the sense of permanence, of control, of stability, of looking for a permanent happiness and looking for a permanent me. This is what we really are looking for. So it's that really brought the whole issue of impermanence up in my mind, and it was a very good image for me. I wish I could share that image because it's just so compelling when you see it. And yet, I think we're all doing that, trying to push the waves back into the ocean, and we will reap weariness from doing it. And so what does anicca or anitya mean? Of course, it's good to keep in mind that anicca, impermanence, whatever word we use, is just a word. And it reminds me of Ajahn Chah would say, the word anger isn't the same as knowing the feeling of anger, is it? And that makes it very obvious to us that the word anicca, we can say it, we can argue about this and that, about anicca, but we don't, it's not the same as experiencing it. And of course, the direct experience is what the Buddha is talking about in developing the Dhamma that allows us to break through to so on to stream entry, that direct seeing and knowing of anicca. And this, of course, changes everything, and it means it is the gateway to the stages of awakening. The first stage of awakening, of course, Sowan or Sotapatti. And at that stage, of course, for the stream enterer, their view is perfect. They have seen the nature of reality. They've seen impermanence. They've seen the Four Noble Truths. And they've seen the conditioned nature of existence. And what they often, you see in the suttas, what the person who is awakened to the stream entry says is, yang kinchi samudaya dhammang sambang tang nirodha dhammang ti, which means whatever is subject to origination, samudaya, is subject to cessation, nirodha. And of course, the first of those that broke through to stream entry is the Venerable Ajahn Nissarano. And this is what he saw. And you see it throughout the suttas again and again. This is the breakthrough to stream entry, is seeing this. And I thought I would mention the verses of Venerable Patachara. And I think this is actually more when she became an arahant, actually. But it gives you an idea that really, these occasions when these breakthroughs occur are not necessarily while one sitting on a cushion or in meditation or walking meditation, because she describes how she, most people will have heard of Venerable Patachara, the Bhikkhuni Patachara, and how she lost her 2 children, her husband, her mother, her father, and her brother, all in one day. It's a very tragic story. It's incredible, actually, and became deranged as a result, became mad, and then met the Buddha, was wandering around Savatthi, half-dressed, half-clad, in a distressed, deranged state for quite a long time, it sounds like, because people were avoiding her and trying to keep her out of the Jetavana. And she came in, and then the Buddha, out of his kindness and this metta, I think, was able to speak to her, to talk to her about this impermanence, to give meaning to her suffering, and for her to make a breakthrough. on that occasion, I think, to stream entry. And more extraordinarily, when you think about it, the Buddha ordained her as a nun straight away, there and then, which is extraordinary, because here is a person who was experiencing definitely a mental health episode, and yet he did. So it's amazing. But what she said about her enlightenment experience was, having washed my feet, I reflected upon the waters. When I saw the foot water flow from the high ground down the slope, my mind became concentrated like an excellent thoroughbred steed. And then she says, having taken a lamp, I entered my cell. I inspected the bed and sat down on the couch. Then, having taken a needle, I pulled down the wick. The liberation of the mind was like the quenching of the lamp. And they say when her mind became focused, when it became focused on the water flowing down the slope, they say that she saw the impermanence of, sometimes some of the water was sinking in the early, as it was just starting to go down the slope, some further and some further down. Just as in her life, she'd experienced her children who had just started their lives dying, her husband who was in the prime of his life, and her parents who were at the end of their lives pass away. But it could also have been really seeing conditions, seeing the conditions of the slope, the way the water flows, and realizing, like that man who was fighting the waves at the beach, you cannot fight these conditions. This is the nature of reality. So this was the experience of Patachara. And I like a saying that makes the importance of anicca very obvious, and it's a lovely one for Buddhists actually, is from Ajahn Chah. And he says, as I've said before many times, in our practice we must turn inwards and find the Buddha. Where is the Buddha? The Buddha is still alive to this very day. Go in and find him. Where is he? At anicca. Go in and find him there. Go and bow to him. Anicca, uncertainty. Isn't that lovely? That's really nice. So some of the different words we use in English at least, give a flavour to anicca. And of course, as I mentioned, it's not a word, it's not just a word, it is an experience. And some of the words we are very familiar with, like impermanence, but it's a very abstract word without much feeling. So I prefer nothing lasts is quite a strong way of giving a feeling to anicca. And of course, when I think of nothing lasts, I think of having gone on pilgrimage to India a couple of times, and you see the Buddhist ruins, and you see how, all the places where the Buddha was and all these extraordinary monks and nuns were, see them broken down and see see the condition of them now, 2,500 plus years later, 2,562, I think they usually say. And another translation, of course, is transience or inconstancy. It's a hard word to say. And it reminds one of samsara, that while we're caught in samsara, we're always moving on. There's a nice phrase, hurrying and hastening through samsara. We can't stop, we can't rest. And so this is a sense of transience, of anicca or anitya. But of course, Ajahn Chah, as you heard in that quotation, was referring to uncertainty. And uncertainty is is an aspect of anicca that's very important, because it gives rise to this incredible sense of insecurity in us. And where we can see this use of uncertainty, or how it comes about, of the uncertain nature, the unreliable nature of things, the unpredictable nature, is in the, as Ajahn Brahm points out, in the Vinaya, when we talk about the opposite, anicca dana. Anicca dana is a regular meal, regular meal. So something that is anicca, and a nicca dana would be irregular meal. So it's pointing to that irregularity, that unpredictable nature of life that we cannot control. And of course, Ajahn Chah uses not sure, uncertain. I like unexpected too, I think, in a way. Unstable is another one. And it's that sense that, you know, we think things will continue as they are, you know, and we, in a sense, we want them to continue as they are. And it reminds me of a Nasrudin story where Nasrudin was taking things to market quite regularly, but he had to cross a river to get to the market. And of course, the main method of transport, his donkey, which was also his friend. And this donkey, he was taking salt to the market, so he put the salt on the donkey's back, and they had to go through the river. The donkey was, before he got to the river, he was really weighed down and virtually close to collapse. He went into the river, and of course the salt dissolved. He came out of the river and he was really frisky and happy and jumping around. And then, of course, Nasrudin was not pleased. He had nothing to take to market. But the next time they went to the market, he put wool. He had wool to sell at the market, so he put that on the donkey's back. And the donkey was quite happy. It wasn't that heavy. Then he went into the stream, and it was so heavy. He staggered. He barely made it out of the stream. And as he came out of the stream, he was struggling to walk. And Nasrudin said, you thought you would get off lightly every time. And that's like us. We have this idea of permanence, of things continuing as we're used to them continuing, maybe as we want them. So one of the things that I was going to focus on too is what is the cause of all our problems? And we know in Buddhism we talk about dukkha and the problems in the world problems within ourselves coming from dukkha. And often in other religions they will say that the problems of the world, dukkha, is due to God's will, you know, this COVID-19, presumably God's will. And the reason there are all these problems in the world is that human beings have transgressed God's will. And this is often expressed as original sin. And we have it in the Adam and Eve story, when they're expelled from paradise and have to enter into a world of old age, sickness and death, the world we know. So that's one explanation. But of course, the Buddha's explanation is far, far different. For him, for the way the Buddha taught, and for the way that all those that awaken see it too, see and know it, is that impermanence is the fundamental nature of reality. And it's this impermanence that gives rise to dukkha. The anicca is such a strong aspect of it. It is the main feature of experience. And I call it the fly in the ointment of samsara, or the flaw in samsara. Samsara is always flawed, actually. And so it is what gives rise to dukkha. Of course, at a personal level, we see Paticca Samuppada, and I'll talk a little bit about that because the talk's not about that today. So just to mention that this is the fundamental ingredient of experience, and something that we ignore usually. But another quotation from Ajahn Chah that I like very much, which puts it very well, and it shows how this is the essential aspect of experience. When Ajahn Chah was a layman, he used to visit ancient ruins, the ruins of ancient monasteries, mostly I would think in Thailand, but maybe in Cambodia too, and which would be cracked and broken in places. And some of his friends would say to him, you know, oh, isn't it such a shame, isn't it, that it's cracked? And he said he would answer, even though he felt that it was a shame, it was a pity. But he said he tended towards the Dhamma. He said, if it wasn't cracked, this ancient temple, this ancient ruin of a monastery, if it wasn't cracked like that, there wouldn't be any Buddha. And he said, I'd say it really heavy for the benefit of my friends, and perhaps they were listening, but still I was listening. Perhaps they weren't listening, but still I was listening. So that's quite nice, isn't it? So this anicca is a real cause of this sense of uncertainty, insecurity, instability, transient. And we see it giving rise in our own personal experience to anxiety and worry. We don't know what will happen or when things will happen. We can't rely on things. And of course, when we hear these descriptions, we can think of the COVID-19 situation in the world at the moment. And it makes people very anxious and fearful when they see this virus spreading so rapidly and many countries in a sort of completely out of control fashion. And of course, it brings up this fear of death. And the Lord Buddha said, whatever is impermanent, and this backs up what I was talking about, which is everything that arises from a cause, is dukkha, it's unsatisfactory. And whatever is impermanent and dukkha is not worthy of being called a self. There's a nice quotation that really puts the whole path, actually. You can see the whole understanding of anicca and how it brings about enlightenment. When the Buddha says the five khandhas, sometimes now called components of personality. And that's the body, of course, rupa or materiality. It's feelings, vedana. It's sanya, perception, sankharas. This is like intention or willed activities. And also vijnana. Those are the five aspects that make up a person. And he says that the five khandhas are anitya, they're impermanent. That is, whatever is impermanent, that is dukkha, unsatisfactory. Whatever is dukkha, that is without atta, without self. What is without self? That is not mine. That I am not. That is not myself. Thus it should be seen by perfect wisdom, samapanyaya, as it really is. Whoever sees by perfect wisdom as it really is, that person's mind, not grasping, is detached from the taints, the asavas, and is liberated. So this is the purpose, as it were, of anicca. And of course, as I mentioned, at a personal level, the cause of dukkha is, the Lord Buddha talks about it in terms of paticca samuppada, which I won't go into, dependent arising of dukkha, how it comes about. And of course, the important thing with that teaching is, of course, the cessation of the cessation mode of paticca samuppada, how this can cease due to the ceasing of causes and conditions through direct understanding of the Four Noble Truths. This is abandoning of delusion, of ignorance, sometimes they call it. And because of that, to be able to abandon craving, tanha, wanting. And we can ask, what blocks us from seeing impermanence, really seeing it? We can all say, as I've mentioned before, we can see things getting older, breaking down. We can see people and animals and dying. But our perceptions, the Buddha said, are distorted. The word is vipallasa, and it really means upside down. It's an inversion of our perception. So that when we're looking at things, we tend to look for permanence in what is impermanent. We're looking for happiness in what is unsatisfactory. Can't permanently make us happy. And beauty in what isn't really beautiful. And self in what is not self. But we have a view like this, and because of that view, we develop the perceptions of permanence in what is impermanent, and so on. And we think about it. And so this cycle becomes stronger and stronger. And we see things, we view things as being permanent, lasting, steady, stable, reliable and dependable. and it distorts our vision, it distorts our perception, or inverts our perception and our thoughts. And a good example of this is pretty obvious, actually, and the Bodhisattva talked about it too, is the three intoxications. When we're young, we think we're always going to be young. And he said, this is intoxication with youth. But this is part of this sanya, vipallasa, distortions of perceptions. And also when we're healthy, we can see this in our own experience, we think we'll always be healthy. We have this feeling. And the same with life. We tend to have the feeling that it will just go on, and we ignore the obvious, that these vehicles, these bodies of ours, have to eventually pass away. They must. And we're not looking at, we're only focusing, usually much of our attention is giving to the beginning of things. We're interested in arising of things, not the passing away. We're interested in births, not deaths. And of course, there's often Dhamma teachers would say that we should, at births, we should be sad for the person who's just come into being, and at death we should be happy for them to be released, or potentially released from being born again. So we're not watching the things change, we're not watching them end and cease. And so we need to train ourselves to investigate. So this is probably the most important part of the, just looking at the time, the talk is, how do we develop our understanding of anicca? And of course we need, and I'll do some short guided meditations too, they'll just be very, very brief. We need to practice to develop the perception of anicca. As I mentioned, we have these distorted perceptions that sees permanence in the impermanent, that sees happiness in those things that are unsatisfactory, that sees beauty in things that aren't beautiful, and sees self in things that aren't self. So the Buddha is encouraging us to develop these perceptions. And of course the famous sutta that in many occasions he's talking about it, but the Girimananda Sutta, he talks about developing the perception, 10 perceptions, but the main one of them is the perception of impermanence, anicca. And of course, to do this, to develop this perception, we have to have some degree of right view, of course, samadhi, some degree of right effort to reduce the unwholesome states of the mind, and some degree of right mindfulness. So we are present, we know what we're experiencing, and some degree of samadhi, so we can focus in on what we're experiencing. And it enables us to see the beginning of things, we can see the persistence of things, and we can see the ending of our experience. These are what we're experiencing. They're not special things, and this is coming from our experience, not from books. And as I mentioned, in the Girimananda Sutta, where the Buddha is talking about how we can develop this perception of anicca, he's talking about we look at the impermanence, the arising and passing away of the 5 khandhas, the 5 personality or components of personality, the materiality, in this case usually our bodies, feeling, perceptions, willed activities I use, and consciousness. And he says here, and it's very interesting when the Buddha talks about, when Venerable Ananda actually is talking about the wonderful and marvellous qualities of the Buddha, he mentions a wonderful and marvellous quality that Venerable Ananda doesn't. And that is, he says, of course he says, that is so, Ananda, with the other things that Venerable Ananda was talking about. And he says, remember this too as a wonderful and marvellous quality of the Tathagata Buddha. Here, Ananda, for the Tathagata, feelings are known as they arise, as they are present, as they disappear. Perceptions are known as they arise, as they are present, as they disappear. Thoughts are known as they arise, as they are present, as they disappear. Remember this too as a wonderful and marvellous quality of the Tathagata. And of course, this is obviously, you know, seeing arising and passing away of the five khandhas, looking at that experience. And this is the experience of a Tathagata. But it's very interesting when you look at that sutra, the marvelous and wonderful, it's called sutra in the Majjhima Nikaya. All the things that Nanda is talking about are very different from this. They're sort of miraculous things and that sort of a nature, and they're very external. But the Buddha is talking about the present moment, experience in the present moment, and this being a wonderful and marvelous quality. So for the Buddha was teaching, of course, the ways we can develop this perception is developing it on a momentary level, like that quotation was just pointing to, seeing things arising and passing away of bodily experience, feelings, and the other mental states, perception and intention. So just for a moment, we will have a little experience of this. Usually, is that okay? I heard some sounds. Usually, it's very important to have a base of stability in the mind, you know, by developing some mindfulness, and then investigating is the best way. So in order to see things arising and passing away. But what we're focusing on is our immediate experience. So just for a moment, we can, if you find it easier, close your eyes and come into the present moment and let go. That means letting go of the past and future. And making sure the body is reasonably comfortable, relaxed. And just paying attention briefly to the breath coming in and going out. To stabilize the mind, just give it some focus. And now we can look at what we're experiencing, whatever it is, in terms of it beginning, persisting, and ending. And we can look in the body, the feelings, that we call them feelings in the body, and the different feelings that arise can be pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. We can look at any of the, if perceptions are arising, the warmth or coolness, hardness or softness, pressure or lightness, tension or relaxation, agitation or peaceful, whatever perceptions we have. We can look at if there are any intentions arising and persisting and changing, how we're reacting to what we experience. Do we want to move? Do we want to get rid of something? Do we want to get something? Do we want to change things? And of course, we can also be aware of the experience of our senses of hearing, smelling, and the body. We're looking at the beginning, the persistence, and the ending of whatever we're watching.
I'm not listening to this. It's good English. Papahan, para kuno program si tara balan. Ami kena hindi.
And so we can come out of meditation. This only gives you a taste, but it gives you an idea of the areas we can look at, we can experience when the mind has got a sufficient base of mindfulness, of steadiness in the mind. And of course, the ultimate level in meditation, of course, and the one that the Bodhisattva used was jhana, jhana, these deep meditations. And from the fourth jhana, it was that the Bodhisattva saw his past lives, not just one or two, millions of them. And of course, when he saw that, what was he seeing? He was seeing anicca, he was seeing impermanence over a vast stretch of time. And the impact on the mind must have been incredible. And then, of course, he saw the arising and passing away of beings. So he saw that's also an aspect of anicca, isn't it? Anicca. And he saw that they arise due to their actions, their karma in that life and previous lives. And in the last watch of the night, he destroyed the negative aspects of the mind, the asvas, the really deep-rooted ones, especially of avijja, of being, views, and sense, sensuality. And these were destroyed by the knowledge of the Four Noble Truths. So that is the Tevijja that quite a few you read in the sutras, in the Theragata, Terigata. This is the experience of the enlightened monks and nuns. This is what they experienced, and of course the impact will be seeing anicca in a very, very strong way, seeing dukkha in a very, very strong way, and also seeing anatta, non-self, in a very strong way. But the Buddha also talked about us contemplating our lives and looking at birth, old age, sickness and death in our lives. We have the 5 daily recollections. And these are things that the Buddha encouraged not only laymen, monks and nuns to do, but laymen and laywomen to do. And he said, if we contemplate, if we recollect old age, sickness and death, being parted from all that is dear and delightful, or that it changes, that's another aspect of it, and also contemplate that we are owners of our karma, then using this can give rise to the path arising for us. Usually he would say, when we contemplate our own experience, that's one level, but when we realize that all beings have this experience of old age, sickness, death, being parted from all that is really so dear to them, and karma, when it reaches that level of all beings being experiencing this, then it's possible for the path to arise. And for that person, when the path arises, of course, that's sowan, isn't it? Sotapatti, or stream entry. So this is another aspect of anicca when we recollect these aspects of that are so evident in our lives. But how often do we reflect on them really, really deeply? And of course, there's that reflection, I am of the nature, say, to grow old. I cannot avoid it. I'm of the nature to become sick. I cannot avoid it. I'm of the nature to die. I cannot avoid it. I'm of the nature to be parted from all that is dear and delightful. And I'm of the nature to be the heir of my karma, and so on. So this is a very important aspect of reflecting on bringing up that perception of anicca, that understanding of anicca. And it reminds me of the story of how the Bhikkhuni Khema became an arahant. She was one of the queens of King Bimbisara, and evidently she never wanted to go and see the Buddha at the Valavana, which is in Rajagaha, or Rajgir they call it now, because she felt that the Buddha might disparage her beauty, because she was supposed to be beautiful. So she always avoided it. And her husband, King Bimbisara, who was very wise, had poets make poems about how beautiful the Valavana was, the bamboo grove. And so she was intrigued and wanted to go, and of course met the Buddha. And the Buddha, what he did, he could understand her faculties, her mind. And what he did was create an image, they say, of a celestial deva or nymph, they call it. Very, very beautiful. They say much more beautiful than Khema, Queen Khema. And before her eyes, you could see this beautiful creature, this beautiful nymph, age, get older and older and older, and eventually collapse and die. And when she saw that, she became an arahant, so they say, became a bhikkhuni, got permission from her husband, King Bimbisara, to become a bhikkhuni. Because she saw, obviously, this is a really strong way of seeing impermanence. And it was her way of making that breakthrough. So I'd like to do another brief guided meditation reflecting on these aspects of aging. Really, it's on the aspects of aging, but it can bring up sickness and death, perhaps, as well as being parted from that which is dear and delightful. And this one, we take our past memories. Particularly, I like to encourage people to think of photos of what they look like. And some people even have baby photos they can reflect on. That would be amazing, isn't it? And think of themselves through these photos. These images, actually, they bring back the past to us in a way. And we can see all these different images in our minds. And so when we do this, we get a sense of anicca, that anitya, that things are changed, we've changed. And all the things that were so important to us at that stage of life, are they still important? And also, big question that comes up, which one of them was me? So it can give rise to a deepening of the understanding of anicca. So we can just close our eyes for a moment and come into the present moment as before, and just pay attention, relax the body and pay attention to the breath for a short time, coming in and going out, calming the mind and the body with the breath. And we can contemplate ourselves aging through these photos. If you can remember the photos, it doesn't have to be a photo. Remembering ourselves from the earliest memory we have, then when we first went to school, and when we became teenagers, and secondary school, when we became adults, and as we approach middle age, and as we get older, we can just bring this to mind and see these images of ourselves, or sense of a feeling of how we were at those times, our earliest memory. And also, when we're doing this, we can remember what is important to us at those times. Maybe it was this particular sight, sound, smells, tastes and touches, or thoughts, feelings, which might be more like people, music, possessions, art, education, religion, whatever it was that was important. When we're young, it's usually toys. We can ask ourselves, am I the same as I was then? Are the things that were so important then still so important? You get a sense of the passage of time, the aging of the body, changing of our mind states, our emotions, our understanding. And now we can come out of this very brief meditation and I continue getting towards the end of the desana. It's very interesting in Sri Lanka, of course. I saw it in the villages. People in their homes, they have lots of photographs of the children, of their relatives. And so this should be quite an easy way of developing this perception of anicca. But of course, the Buddha is all-encompassing in the way he teaches anicca. And of course, he goes even to the cosmic level. And this is more, he's more interested in this mind and this body, isn't he? Really, this is the focus of the Four Noble Truths. But even the cosmic level, the destruction of the earth and this solar system, he describes in the seventh sun, Seven Sun Sutra, it's called in English, Seven Sun Sutra, in the Anguttara Nikaya, the numerical discourses. And this is lovely because it really it shows you the effect, the result of understanding impermanence. And he talks about how each of these previous suns arises and then the earth gets dry and the water disappears and the streams dry up and the lakes dry up and then the ocean dries up and goes on. And when you get to the seventh sun, the earth catches on fire and the great earth and Mount Sinuru, which is in the like a mythical place in the Himalayas, it catches on fire, it's burning. So he says, so it is when this great earth and Sinuru, the king of mountains, maybe we think of it as Mount Everest, but I don't think it is, it's Mount Kailash, are blazing and burning. So impermanent are conditioned things, so impermanent are conditioned things, so unstable, so unreliable. It is enough to become disenchanted with all conditioned things, enough to become dispassionate towards them, enough to be liberated from them. So even at this level, the Lord Buddha is pointing to the power of anicca to give rise to that understanding that shows us that these things are so conditioned, they're so, you think of this scale as being huge time scale, but so transitory, so unstable, so unreliable. And because of that, seeing this, as he calls it, becoming disenchanted, nibbida, turning away. This is not something one does oneself. The mind just turns away because it sees the impermanence of these things, the fascination, the spell is broken, and then this dispassion, this sense of the, we call it viraga, the fading away of tanha, our wanting, our consuming interest in manipulating experience arises, so it fades away, and then the mind is liberated. So that's beautiful, isn't it? So I'd like to, getting close to the end actually, just to finish off by talking about what is the wisdom of anicca that frees us. And of course, you know, when we see things more in accord with reality, of course, life is going to get much, much easier. So for a sowana, a stream enterer, sotapatti, life is much, much easier because then they understand impermanence. They understand reality. And so the difficulty of all the dukkha that they experience is much reduced, because they're expecting the unexpected. And this gives rise to more ease and happiness and peace in the mind. So this aspect of seeing reality, and as I said, you know, if we recognize that uncertainty is certain, that impermanence is permanence, then we're not fighting with reality. We're not on the beach with the bathroom floor wiper. And so this is this helps us in our experience of life. The stream enterer is someone who's reduced their suffering enormously, and the Buddha once mentioned that the suffering that the stream enterer has left is equivalent to some dirt on their little fingernail compared to the whole earth. So this is really quite extraordinarily reduced. And there's a nice simile that Ajahn Chah gives when he used to hold up a glass and say, "Oh, this glass is already broken." And of course, people could see it wasn't broken. But he said, yes, it isn't broken yet, but it is of the nature to break. That the fact that it's come together from causes and conditions, it will break apart one day. And when it does break apart, if we understand that this is the nature of glasses, we won't be so upset. We won't, he says, hate or whatever was the cause for that breaking of that glass. And he said, when we have that knowledge, that the glass is already broken. And he used to say this with death too. He said, that death was already inside this body. And it is, in a sense. That's one way of looking at it, isn't it? The glass is already broken, but death is already inside this body. And he said, when we know that, when we understand that, when we have that understanding, it's like a spillway in a dam, where the water in a dam, as the water level builds up, it can flow off safely because we have the understanding of impermanence. If we don't have the understanding of impermanence, if we can't accept it, then that dam will break. We'll experience so much suffering when someone dear in our life dies, or we lose something so precious to us, whether it be another person, possessions, whatever it is. So this is a lovely way that this simile works, if we can remember the glass is already broken. Sounds crazy, doesn't it? So this is very useful. But on a positive side, I'd like to, almost end, mention a story of Ajahn Nisaro's that I like because it really illustrates impermanence and nitya in a very positive way. And it was when he was a layperson traveling to India at the age of about 18, 19. He was very young and he went overland. And I think this bus trip was from Tehran, and it was a very, very long bus trip. And it was going, I think, for quite maybe a day, another night. And all around him was desert. And, it's just parched and nothing, no signs of life or anything like that. And then at night, one of the nights on this bus, it rained so heavily. And as the daylight came up, when he was looking out the bus window, he couldn't believe it. There was an ocean, he said, of beautiful flowers of all these different colours around. He couldn't believe it. He thought, this is extraordinary. And he also, he also recognised it as a simile for our lives, that nothing is permanent. It can change, and we can change. Sometimes we may feel like the desert, and then it all changes, that potential. So we just need to have the faith that flowers are there. And given the right conditions, they will blossom. Isn't that a beautiful image, the flowers just suddenly appearing the next morning? It's incredible. They're obviously ready to pop out of the ground. And also one of the benefits of anicca too is that we tend to be more forgiving because we know we ourselves and also other people are not permanently like that. We don't have to pigeonhole people as always being like that, which is the way we can often view people when we view them as individuals, as selves. And I like to always mention too, because we think of Angulimala, isn't it? I mean, if we thought of him as the murderer, is it possible for him to become an arahant? So this pigeonholing, we can soften our minds when we see one thing is impermanence, but when we see conditioning too, we can soften our judgments of ourselves and others. And so just like to, yes, and yeah, it's good. But the most important thing about anicca, and I've mentioned it a number of times, is that it's the deep insight that frees us. It's the wisdom that frees us. And what does it free us from? It frees us from delusion, sometimes called avijja or ignorance. It allows us, because once we see things clearly, that the delusion that allows us to crave for things, to want to get rid of things, is destroyed. And with it, all those attachments, the upadanas, the attachments to sensual pleasure, sensual experience, the attachments to views, to rites and rituals, and most importantly, attachment to self. And this is, of course, where a stream enterer is, the three fetters we talk about that are destroyed by fear, by stream entry. This is part of that upadana. And stream entry destroys that view that there's a permanent me in here, a permanent self. And also it destroys that belief in rites and rituals that certain activities will give rise to enlightenment, to this ultimate happiness. And also it destroys any doubt that we had that the Buddha and Dhamma and the Sangha are the truth, the Arya Sangha at least are the truth. And it also means that a person who becomes a stream enterer has seen conditionality, they've seen Paticca Samuppada, they've seen the Four Noble Truths. So they've seen all that, but what they have seen is that everything that arises, all that is of the nature deceived. So this is the essence, the purpose of developing anicca. First of all, the perception of anicca, and then going deeply into the direct experience of anicca. So I'd like to end the Desana here by encouraging everyone, myself included, to develop this perception of anicca, to look for it in the momentary experiences in meditation, reflecting on the 5 daily recollections, and also reflecting on it in the world outside ourselves too, the level of the experience outside ourselves. So I'd like to finish there, and if there are some comments and questions, so I can, first of all, there was one that Mr. Kumar Punchiheva sent, so I can bring that one up. I think I can find it. And this one says, it's received from a devout practicing Buddhist, Sadawa Baduhayek. It sounds like. It says, Venerable Sir, I shall appreciate if you would clarify how a person would know that he, she has attained Sotapanna status, that's so on. In other words, if a person attains the status of so on, how would he, she feel or know that they have come up to that stage? So right. Well, of course, it will be an experience of, well, obviously of impermanence at a deep level. That will be something that will be part of that experience. And not only that, as I mentioned, an understanding of conditioned nature of one's own experience, all experience. And also, because of that, seeing through that view of self. So really, too, one of the ways that we can know that one's attained Sotapatti or Sotapanna, so on, is what the Buddha gave as the mirror of the Dhamma. Because Venerable Ananda was often asking the Lord Buddha, what was the destination? What was of this person, of that person who just passed away? And eventually the Buddha I think he was a bit tired of it actually, and he gave him this mirror of the Dhamma that you could tell that somebody was had reached at least, well, no, at minimum, the Sotapanna or stream entry or so on level. And that was that they had unshakable faith in the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha, and they had the sila which the noble ones respect. And so that is a way of showing if a person has attained so on, is to see, do they have this unshakable faith in the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha? Because why do they have that? They've seen it for themselves. Because if you see something, if you experience something for yourself, you know that the person who taught that, yes, they must have seen that, and that others also saw that. So this is part of, this, it's just experiential. So you have unshakable faith, confidence, conviction. It's not faith by that stage, I think, because it's really confirmed in your own experience. The Buddha, the Lord Buddha, was enlightened. The teachings, the Dhamma, is a teaching on truth, reality, the Dhamma. And there are Sangha, Arya Sangha, those that have realized those teachings. And also because of seeing conditionality, one's also, I think, the sila is also perfected at that stage, we say. And so one cannot break the Panchasila without telling another about that soon after that's happened. But also we can see experientially for so one, what fetters have gone. So that's an experience too. No longer will that sense of I, me, mine be so strong. No longer will one be so impacted by the words of other people, the praise, the blame, all those things. So this is one of the major things. It's a breakthrough, isn't it? When the sense of self, view of self, is seen as just a view. It's not a reality. There isn't this me in here, a permanent me, a permanent I in here. So this is a very big change, and it allows for the development of the further stages of enlightenment. It's the big jump from being a person who isn't enlightened or awakened to a person who is. And it is a big jump because that sense of self is something that is so intrinsic to experience that when that view is shattered, it's going to have a big impact. And of course, the other ones is note that the fetter of doubt, that's obviously confirmed conviction, you could say, or faith in the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha. And also that rites and certain observances or rituals, which were common at the time of the Buddha, seeing that they too, are not valid, they're not the path. Because one has seen the path, one knows what isn't the path, which is a lot of other things that people practice. So I hope that gives you some sort of idea of how a person would know if they've attained, and so on, and what they would experience, what they would feel, and what they would know. As I say, they'd know Paticca Samuppada, they would know Four Noble Truths, they know from experience Anicca, that's the important one. That everything that arises is of everything that is of the nature to arise is of the nature to cease. So thank you for that. And there is another question in Sinhala, which I think Venerable Aranavihari, he's here, and I think you'll see a photo of him soon, will answer. Have you got the question there?
Yeah.
Because you can say it, and speak it in Sinhala.
I can say.
So thank you very much.
Yeah, this question is I saw it in Sinhala, so I will read it. Okay, I think you can hear.
ආයුෂය නැමැති ධර්මතාවය රූපය නොමැති අවස්ථාවල සිත හා සම්බන්ධව පැවතිය යුතු නිසා තේරවාදීහු සිය අභිධර්ම විග්‍රහයන්හිදී සබ්බ චිත්ත සාධාරණ චෛතසික අතරට අරූපී ජීවිතේන්ද්‍රිය නමින්ද රූප 28 අතරට රූප ජීවිතේන්ද්‍රිය නමින්ද ආයුෂය නියෝජනය කරන ධර්ම දෙකක් එක්කල බව දැක්වේ. ජීවිතේන්ද්‍රිය නැමැති චෛතසිකය බුද්ධ දේශනාව තුළ නොමැතිද? නැතහොත් එය පසු කාලීන එකතු කිරීමක්ද? මේක තමයි ප්‍රශ්නේ. මම සිංහලෙන් උත්තරය දෙනවා නම් මේ ජීවිතේන්ද්‍රිය නැමැති චෛතසිකය බුද්ධ දේශනාව තුළ නොමැතිද කියලා අහුවම ඒකට උත්තරය තමයි ඇත්තටම සූත්‍ර දේශනාවල මේ ජීවිතේන්ද්‍රිය කියන වචනේ හොයාගන්න බෑ. මේකේ එන්නේ පසු කාලීන අභිධර්මයත් එක්ක. ඊළඟ එක තමයි ඒ කියන්නේ ඒක ගැන රිසර්ච් කරන අය විතරක් නෙවෙයි. දැන් ඕන කෙනෙක් සූත්‍ර පිටකේ බුද්ධ දේශනාව සර්ච් කරොත් ත්‍රිපිටක ඇප් එකක ඒක ඊටාම පැහැදිලි. ත්‍රිපිටකයේ සූත්‍ර දේශනාවල කොහෙවත් නැහැ මේ ජීවිතේන්ද්‍රිය කියන වචනේ. ඒක එන්නේ විනය පසු කාලීනව විනය විභංගවල එනවා. එහෙම නැත්නම් අභිධර්මයේ එනවා. ඒ විදිහට තමයි මේකට උත්තර දෙන්න පුළුවන්. මොකද මේ ජීවිතේන්ද්‍රිය කියන එක මේ ගැන ඒ කියන්නේ මේ ධර්මයේ කියන එක ගැන හිතන අය තමයි දාලා තියෙන්නේ. මොකද මේක විග්‍රහ කරන්න, කතා කරන්න, වාද කරන්න ඕන වෙනකොට. නමුත් මේ නිවන් මාර්ගයේ යන කෙනාට මේ විග්‍රහය එච්චරම වැදගත් නැහැ. ඊට වඩා වටින්නේ සත්‍තිස් බෝධිපාක්ෂික ධර්ම. සත්‍තිස් බෝධිපාක්ෂික ධර්මවල ඉන්ද්‍රිය ධර්ම හැටියට පෙන්වන දේවල් අතර ජීවිතේන්ද්‍රිය කියලා එකක් පෙන්වන්නේ නැහැ. මේ ඉන්ද්‍රිය ධර්ම බල ධර්ම හැටියට පෙන්වන්නේ සද්ධා විරිය සති සමාධි ප්‍රඥා. සමහර තැනක විග්‍රහයකදීවත් දැන් මේ ජීවිතේන්ද්‍රිය කියන වචනේ ඇත්තටම පසු කාලීන වචනයක් හැටියට තමයි මට කියන්න පුළුවන්. අන්න මගේ සිංහලෙන් උත්තරේ. දැන් අජාන් නිස්සරණෝ දැන් කතා කරයි.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much for that. That was quite brief, actually. So,
Yeah, it is a brief.
very good. So, if there are one more question, we could probably take another question, I suspect, if there is. Do we have a way of... No, that's it.
So is there any other question?
I don't know.
Now all of you can unmute, and if you have any questions...
just unmute if you have a question, actually.
Yeah.
Just as... Oh, they probably can't. Yeah.
Yeah. If you have any questions, you can ask.
That sounds fine. That's good. All right. Yes.
If anyone has any questions, can ask.
Yes, if you have any questions, you can speak. You can possibly...
You can unmute. And
unmute, if you know what unmute means, just to so you can speak on the microphone, I can hear you, and Venerable Ajahn Vihari can hear you. No, I think that's good.
Yeah.
Monday.
Oh, hello.
Ratna.
Yeah.
So you just had a bout with that coming close to. How's your anicca going?
Oh, it's progressing well.
Good.
I think
You're into healthy anicca then.
Yeah, that's but at least not fighting it too much,
Yeah.
In one's life, old age, sickness, and death, it gets challenging as you get older. So, and I think
You don't have to tell me. I'm there.
Mr. Kumar probably is thinking the same as well. So, this is our challenge, and the way we deal with it is if we understand some of the Dhamma, it helps us, and in a sense it confirms the Dhamma, and so that gives us a bit more inner happiness, inner strength. Inner strength is probably a better word. So, yes. So life is doing that for us. we're experiencing anicca all the time.
Good. Take care.
Thank you. Yeah. So I think.
Now, okay.
Oh, right. Yes.
Yeah, he can. You can take it.
All right. So I'd probably now would be the time for the dedication of merit. So I can do that, and we can do the chanting to finish the Desana today. And it's quite a lengthy list of a dedication of merit, which is nice because Mr. Kumar wrote to me that he wanted to show his gratitude to the Kalyana Mittas that had shown him the way over the last 70 years. And it was quite a list, so, but I've abbreviated it. So, and he mentioned particularly Venerable Mirese Gunasiri and the other monks from the Mirisa Pansala, where his family, Mr. Kumar's family, that's their family village, Gamma. And also he mentioned the monks from Malikaramia and Sri Vajrayaramia Bamblapitiya, those two. At least Sri Vajrayaramia is famous. And to the monks at the Narada Center, in particular Venerable Chandakirti and Venerable Metavihari, but also Venerable Dhammavihari, who's passed away. So some of these are living and some have passed away. And all the monks associated with Mitrigala Nissarano, who's thinking of particularly of Venerable Mitrigala Dhammanusanti, who was the founder as a layperson of Mitrigala, and all those bhikkhus and bhikkhunis in Sri Lanka and overseas who helped dedicate merit to the to Mr. Kumar's wife, Mrs. Damdara. And also he wanted to pass to dedicate merit, to remember. And when we dedicate merit, it's that act of gratitude, of remembering the person, of having thanks for their the impact that they had, the gifts that they gave them during their lives. And Mr. Kumar's family, who was thinking particularly, wished to dedicate merit to his departed parents, the late Gadiye Punchi Hewage Jivananda Silva, and Mrs. Leslin Piasili Jayasuriya, and their parents. So that's going back, grandparents. The late G.P. Abraham Silva and Mrs. Alice Mara Jayasuriya, and also the other parents. The late Paulus de Silva and Jayasuriya, and Mrs. Punchi Hewage Chalinona. So that's the, and also to dedicate merit to his beloved wife, the late, Mrs. Damdara Uyang Singhe Jayawardena, and her parents, the late Uyang Singhe Jayawardena Sumana Singhe, and Mrs. Piyawati Sumana Singhe, and their parents, though not mentioned. So, and I'd like to thank Mr. Kumar Punchiheva for arranging this. It's a bit of an experiment for you too. First off, it's the inaugural one, so I'm sure it will get easier as time goes by. And also to thank Venerable Ranavihari, who is here at Newbury Monastery, spending the vasa with myself and 3 other monks. So it's a very auspicious beginning to the new monk section. And you can see we're in the meditation hall, which is very, very beautiful. And most importantly, warm. It's got in-floor heating. And I'd like to thank everyone who helped in whatever way possible, because I know organizing the Zoom and all that took some time, and probably people in Sri Lanka have helped as well. And I'd like to thank all of those who participated today. Some of the names I know well, so hello to you all, and to thank you all. So, and now I can do the chanting, and then maybe to finish off, if Mr. Kumar would like to make a comment, you're welcome to. So this is the chanting for sharing the merit. So, Itavata cha amhe sambatang punya sampadang samme deva numodantu samba sampati sindhya itavata cha amhe sambatang punya sampadang samme buddha anumodantu samba sampati sindhya Sa etavata jamhe samvatang punya sampadam samme satta anumodantu samma sampati sindhya akazanta chabumata devanaga mahindika punyang tang anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanam akazantam chabumata devanaga mahindika punyang tang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanam akazantam chabumata devanaga mahindika Punyang tang anumoditva chirang rakantu twang sada. And now we can share the merits. We can see ourselves giving this gift of merit to those that we've dedicated it to. Idang me nyati nang hontu sukita hontu nyatayo. Idang me nyati nang hontu Sukita hontu nyatayo, idang me nyati nang hotu. Sukita hontu nyatayo, imina punya kamena, mame bala samagamo, satang samagamo hotu. Yavani bana patiya, idang me punya kamang. Asavak kaya vahang hotu samaduka pamuchatu. May you abide in well-being, in freedom from affliction, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from anxiety, and may you maintain well-being in yourselves. May everyone abide in well-being, in freedom from affliction, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from anxiety, and may they maintain well-being in themselves. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And of course, the best dedication of merit is, of course, our practice. And this is what we offer to our Kalyana Mitas. This is the real gift. That Kalyana Mitas will be very pleased, very happy if they can be aware that you are practicing and you're developing the path, that you are heading in the direction or experiencing the insight of anicca, of impermanence, and that first step to security from samsara. So I'd like to thank you all for participating today, and I'd like to invite Mr. Kumar Punchiheva, if you would like to say some words and to conclude the Dhammadesana today and this program.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Oh,
Everyone, sadhu.
all right.
Much merit to Venerable Bhikkhu Ajahn Nissarano and Venerable Bhikkhu Nissarano.
Thank you.
I will now speak a few words for the benefit of the listeners. Pinatni, mema dharma sakacha malave prathama dharma deshanava Sinhala දේශනය අනුරාධපුර පුණ්‍ය භූමියේ සිට පූජ්‍ය තලල්ලේ චන්දකිති ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේ විසින් පටිගත කර අවන භික්ෂු Charitable Trust YouTube channel ඔස්සේ ඔබට ශ්‍රවණය කළ හැක. ඊළඟට මෙම ධර්ම සාකච්ඡා මාලාවේ ප්‍රථම ඉංග්‍රීසි දේශනය පූජ්‍ය ඕස්ට්‍රේලියාවේ නිස්සරණ ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේ සහ පූජ්‍ය පානතුරේ අරණවිහාරී ස්වාමීන් වහන්සේ සමග ඕස්ට්‍රේලියාවේ වික්ටෝරියා ප්‍රාන්තයේ නිව්බරි ආරණ්‍ය සේනාසනය සිට ඔබ සැම දැනට ශ්‍රවණය කළ දේශනයයි. දැන් මම ඒක ඉංග්‍රීසියෙන්ුත් කියන්නම්. Dear Tamma friends, this is the introductory session of the English version of a series of sermons or discussions or dialogues or whatever you may call it. We have named it Along the Noble Path. Dialogue with spiritual friends. සිංහලෙන් ඒ කියන්නේ පැවැත්මෙන් නැවැත්මට කලන මිතුරු ඇසුරින් සදහම් පැන විසඳුම්. This program will be on YouTube. If you wish to send any questions about Dhamma, you may send it to the email address bhikkhutransit@gmail.com, and whenever we collect, say, 5 or 10 questions, we could have another session like this on the YouTube channel or Zoom. Anyway, whichever way, it will be later uploaded onto YouTube so that you can listen later on. Thank you. Everyone saranai.
Everyone saranai.
Bhavatu sabba mangalam rakkantu sabba devata sabba dhammanubhavena sabba buddhanubhavena sabba dhammanubhavena sabba sanghanubhavena sada sutti bhavantu te. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Very good.